Ahead of the planned launch of the National Livestock Transformative Program, the Minister of Livestock Development, Idi Mukhtar, has met with stakeholders in Wase local government area on the benefits and importance of the settlement scheme. Let's cross live to our Lagos studios and speak to the Deputy National Publicity Secretary of the Middle Belt Forum, Stanley Kavwam. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kavwam, on the news tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So the government is calling this a livestock village with infrastructure and security. But to some Nigerians, they feel this is Ruga in a different name or with a different name. What's your initial reaction to this?
Well, I would start with a quotation by Desmond Tutu, where he remarked that we learn from history that we don't learn from history. Now, I would just want to take it from a historical context because the Plateau State government apparently doesn't understand its own context and the history of the people of the state. And just give me some few minutes to just, give you a background as to what I want to put out as far as my response is to the question you've asked. As far as I'm concerned, this is actually a Trojan horse, which is a Greek gift. I'll come back to that. Before the jihad waged by Usman Danfodio in 1804, our forebears, that's from the history books, used to admit and accommodate Fulani nomads into their communities. And these communities that they were being accommodated were called Zango in Hausa. In other words, they were cattle colonies. And they all spread across the length and breadth of the Middle Belt. Eventually, and they were living peacefully with these Fulani nomads who usually come during the dry season. They would farm, they would graze their cattle, and when it is rainy season, they will move to other places to allow the farmers to farm. And of course, eventually, given that they were living in peace, eventually, these Zangos or cattle colonies now began, of course, to have a population of Fulanis because, of course, they procreate. And given that, of course, they were giving birth to children, they now eventually had communities within the length and breadth of the Middle Belt. When the Usman Danfodio Jihad was waged in 1804, most of these Fulani nomads who were living in these Zangos or cattle colonies now went over to collect the flag of Usman Danfodio, which was called Tutang Usmana in Hausa then. And then they now came back and waged war on these host communities. And after waging war on these host communities, they now took over and then established emirate system in most of these communities that were actually independent. After establishing this emirate system, what they then did was that as tributes to the Sokoto Caliphate, which they of course had to do on a monthly basis, what they were now taking as tributes or as tax, as the case may be, were slaves. Because when they conquered from that particular war, they turned all those host communities into slavery. And they were now paying tax to the caliphate in Sokoto using these host community members whom they have turned into slaves. They were taking them to Sokoto, and from Sokoto, most of them were now moved to Egypt, which was the biggest slave market, and then from there, particularly in the transatlantic slave trade to other parts of Europe. Now, having established this background, the infamous rural grazing area policy that is now being embellished and garnished, or in other words, deodorized to look like, a livestock transformation program, is actually a fallacy. And my worry is that the same people who had rejected this policy, had condemned it, and had seen it as the greatest evil, are now the same people who are now I mean,
right.
giving
If
it
I may
all
come in
manner
here,
of, they have adorned it with a toga of sainthood.
right.
Because the thing is this.
Stanley, if you
I
would
have
allow
a-
me,
I have a
I don't know if you can hear me, but just allow me to come in very quickly. I mean, very interesting historical background that you've just given us. It does look like you're saying that this is history about to repeat itself. Are you saying that this Ruga plan, in spite of the fact that the Minister of Livestock Development is going around with stakeholders to, help them understand and buy in to see the benefits and importance of the settlement scheme. Are you saying that this Ruga scheme will not work? If it will not, what are the options?
Okay. You're building the rural grazing area fundamentally for cattle rearing. What have you done for the people who are rearing pigs on the plateau? And one thing I know is that Plateau is an agrarian community or an agrarian society, and 80% of the people engage in farming. And I know that historically, Plateau is not a Fulani. It's not historically a Fulani territory. And if at all there's anything you'd want to do to boost agricultural production or livestock production, I believe that first and foremost you would take into cognizance the interests of or the major commercial activities or agricultural activities of the indigenous population. That is number one. Number two, we are all aware of all the series of unrestrained attacks that communities on the plateau have come under, and only one ethnic group has been fingered in the course of all of these attacks. When there's any attack claiming lives, be it from Enugu, be it in the southwest, be it in the middle belt, all of the farming communities that we have that have come under attack, it is only the Fulani that have always been fingered. And of course, there are instances, even for the last attack that took place in Jos, they held a press conference in Kaduna, and they were what? Given terms for peace, which means they are what? Taking on responsibility for these attacks. Now, imagine that they do not have a base that has in any way officially or legally given to them, but they have so far taken over 164 communities on the plateau, renamed them, and they inhabit those communities. And as if that were not enough, you now want to give them a place to now invite them to move from different parts of Africa to come and settle in this place. And like I've said from the historical antecedents of what we are dealing with in the Middle Belt, this is a recipe for disaster. And as far as I'm concerned, if the government is deluded to believe that this is in any way going to transform or improve the economic viability of the people of Plateau, then they are deceiving themselves. And the point is this: the truth remains the truth. If what I'm saying here is a lie or is a fallacy, I believe that time will either prove me right or wrong. But I believe that this is the most infamous policy that should be rejected and resisted by all Plateau people, because it portends danger for our peaceful coexistence. The troubles that we're going through, the mass burials that we've been carrying out, I mean, on an unrestrained basis, it's enough for us to have a rethink about inviting people who don't even have we don't know their identity. There is not any process to actually document and know where these people are coming in from. And by the time that you now open this place,
is the question. I know that this topic, I mean, cannot be exhausted in the time frame that we have. Unfortunately, it's the news and we have to move. But the second leg to the question you were asked by Ngozi is, what is the alternative? And I just want to chip into that as we try to wrap up. Okay. The minister is going about meeting with stakeholders. Has he consulted you? Have you made this position known to him that it cannot work?
I am speaking on behalf of the Middle Belt Forum, which is an umbrella body of all the ethnic nationalities of the Middle Belt. What we need in the Middle Belt, if he actually wants to help the Middle Beltans, we are largely agrarian farmers. Let them provide us with farm inputs like fertilizer, provide us with improved seedlings, Provide us with pumping water, generators, so that we can engage at least even in dry season farming. Let them help us with inputs that would actually boost agricultural production. And let them make the farmlands safe for farmers to go in and farm. We are not cattle breeders on the plateau. And what we need is a means with which we can actually farm and provide food for ourselves, and not to be giving our land to people who we don't even know where they're coming from.
Would it make much difference if, based on your demands, that government takes care of farmers and takes care of herders at the same time? Would it make any difference to, your objection to government providing this rural, livestock settlement?
As far as I'm concerned, what the government is doing is a misplacement of priority. How could you have over 90% of your indigenous population as farmers, and you neglect them? They are being killed, they are being chased away from their farmlands, and you've not done anything to ensure that they return to the farm and produce food. You've not done anything to resettle all those that have been displaced from their homes. And all that you're coming to tell us is that you want to give a colony for some people who we don't even know where they're coming from to come and graze and rear livestock. The nomadic Fulani that we know cannot even be sedentary.
Before we let you go, very quickly, don't you think this ethnic profiling and mutual suspicion and distrust is what's making it even more difficult, to resolve or to solve this problem that's the herder-farmer clashes and other, crises that you have in Plateau State?
There has never been any clash on the plateau. It has been purely genocide. Our people are being attacked when they are living peacefully in their communities, in their homes, going about with their normal peasant life. There has never been any clash. Our people are being attacked, and what is going on the plateau and most parts of Middle Belt is pure genocide. So there's no any ethnic profiling here. It's all about calling a spade a spade. And like I said, this is a Trojan horse, is a Greek gift that is intended to annihilate and depopulate our people and cripple us completely economically.
Well,
and it stands completely against anything.
Yeah, you echo the sentiment of one of the victims we just spoke with, who said this has been one-sided all along and should not be described as a clash. But you did not respond to one of my questions to say, have you been consulted by the minister who is meeting with stakeholders? Have you made your position known to the government?
The Middle Belt Forum has not been consulted by either the government or the minister. Okay. So, of course, until we are consulted or we are invited to the negotiating table, of course, we would still make all of these points that I've stated, because that is our position.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Stanley Kavwam is the Deputy National Publicity Secretary of the Middle Belt Forum. Thank you for joining us.